Hi, I'm Tom Burke, and welcome to Public Health on the Inside, your inside look into the world of public health. I'm the Associate Dean for Public Health Practice here at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and through this series of podcasts, I want to take you to the front lines of public health, through our faculty, through our students, and through those people who work on the front lines. The world of public health practice is filled with all kinds of opportunities, and that's what we'll explore in this podcast. I'm very pleased today to introduce a colleague of mine, Dr. David Jernigan, who directs the Center on Alcohol Marketing in Youth here at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And David is one of our faculty who works at that very difficult and challenging front line of science, policy, politics, and big business. He's worked as an advisor to the World Health Organization and the World Bank. He's the principal author of the WHO's first status report on alcohol and the global status report on alcohol in youth. And in addition to running the center here on alcohol and youth, he teaches courses on social and behavioral aspects of health, media advocacy, and alcohol policy. He is really a person who is doing that millions at a time thing and impacting alcohol policy, not just here in Maryland, but throughout the world. David, welcome to Public Health on the Inside.
Thanks for having me.
Now, first off, you're a sociologist. I'd like to ask you a little bit, how'd you get into the public health side of things?
I'm a sociologist, and as a sociologist, I'm interested in the relationship between the largest structures we have in society all the way down to the smallest aspects of human behavior. And alcohol is perfect for doing that because it is the essential individual behavior, and yet the key determinants of that behavior and the key things that we want to influence from a public health perspective are these large societal factors, including the organization of the alcohol industry itself.
That's not an easy thing to take on. Now, we all have favorite commercials. Mine happens to be gerbils riding around in a very cool car and listening to rap music. But there's also That Most Interesting Man in the World and a new campaign saying if you don't drink a certain beer, then you've done an unmanly thing. So there's all kinds of strategies, and you're wise to this. You're applying some science to taking a look at the way marketing is done.
Well, you know, marketing, and in particular the marketing of alcohol, it's a sociologist's field day because alcohol marketing rides on culture. Alcohol itself is used so differently in so many different cultures, but from a public health perspective, what's so critical about marketing is the influence that it has on young people. And so what our center tries to do is we actually monitor the amount that young people are exposed to alcohol advertising, and we can compare that to the degree that adults are exposed to it. You can debate whether marketing influences adults, but at this point, there's not a lot of debate around the degree that it influences young people, and alcohol is the number one drug among young people in the U.S., responsible for somewhere around 5,000 deaths a year of people under age 21. It's also depending on how you count, the third or fourth leading preventable or behavioral cause of death worldwide. So as a sociologist, I always wanted to have a meaningful life. I wasn't satisfied with simply studying things for the sake of knowledge. I wanted to see my knowledge actually make a difference in people's lives. And that's what I've been able to do by studying alcohol marketing, I hope.
Wow. Well, let's talk about that making a difference thing. A lot of researchers really like to stick to the science, but practitioners aren't afraid to get in there and mix it up. And you certainly have done that. And actually, you've done a tremendous job as an advocate for alcohol policies that would protect public health. And perhaps you can tell me a little bit about your role in a major triumph here in Maryland recently in changing alcohol policy and the alcohol tax.
Sure. Just to be very blunt about it, I am an advocate. I am an interested scientist. I actually am fairly skeptical of pure objectivity in science, and certainly in my own field. What I understand is that the science is easily politicized, and in particular it's politicized by the research questions that people ask. And my research questions have always been driven by what the policy opportunities are in the moment, or what policy opportunities I can promote by doing research that will support people being able to make change. And what you're referring to is a good example of that. We recently here in Maryland passed the first increase on the taxes on alcohol, first increase on distilled spirits taxes since 1955, first increase on beer and wine taxes since 1972. It's a 3% increase in the sales tax, particularly applied to alcohol. It'll raise somewhere between $85 and $100 million a year, and a bunch of that money will go to really great things like services for people with developmental disabilities and so on. The research that we did to assist that campaign was, along with a health economist here at the school, Hugh Waters, we modeled what is likely to happen with that kind of a tax increase. And from that modeling, we were able to say, look, this 3% tax increase will prevent 6,500 cases of alcohol abuse or dependence in the state every year. It'll save 14 lives a year. It'll prevent X many violent assaults, cases of severe violence against children, and so on. And this was powerful public health data that the advocates, frankly, including me, were able to use in conversations with legislators to help them stay on track in the very difficult political process that happens when you try to do a tax increase, particularly in a recessionary climate.
It's amazing now when you hear so much political pressure on job-killing legislation and certainly the anti-tax sentiment throughout the land to have this success for the first time since 1955. It's just a great example of bringing good, solid public health science data to inform the decision makers.
But there must have been incredible pressure from the tavern owners, from the restaurants, from the big business of alcoholic beverages. What's that like?
It makes your day worthwhile. You have a worthy opponent. I mean, the hearings were flooded with industry people and their allies. They said and wrote all sorts of nasty things about me during the campaign, and they'll probably keep doing that. But they couldn't attack the science.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of knowing social science, of being able to take these tools and apply them to real live policy debates day to day. And it wasn't enough just to write the report and put it out there, and it's very helpful to understand some of the basic principles about how the news business works. When the world's largest spirits company's vice president wrote a column attacking our work in the Baltimore Sun, literally within about 3 hours of it appearing, we had a response into the Sun. It appeared the next day. It was signed by me and 2 leading economists. It's that kind of rapid response of being willing to interrupt your day, interrupt your life as a researcher and a scientist and a teacher and everything else, and realize policy opportunities don't wait.
That's great. And these things don't happen by accident. And historically, public health really hasn't endorsed and been all that successful in many of the marketing and advocacy things that you have turned into a science and are teaching our students. So I'd like maybe to ask you a little bit about that. There is a very deliberate strategy that you employ, and it seems like it has implications far beyond just alcohol and youth, and that it may really impact us throughout the field of public health.
Well, there's a set of priority decisions that I make and that I encourage others in my field to make. So often in public health, we are pushed to do the short term, the doable now, the more comfortable, and policy campaigns, they take a long time. They make people uncomfortable. If they were easy, if they were non-controversial, we probably would already have done them. So being willing to get in and get dirty, being willing to do things that are long-term. You know, I had my first state-level alcohol tax campaign in 1991, and the industry cleaned our clock. We got killed in that campaign, and I learned a lot that I brought to this campaign now 18 years later. There's a philosophy that I have as an advocate, which is that it's worth spending time going after these longer-term objectives. Because if we can make a big change that affects lots and lots of people, that's so much more what I think we're trying to do in public health. So that philosophy, it brings with it being willing to be water dripping on a stone, the steady, constant counterforce against some of the most powerful trends in our society. As an advocate, I have to be good at understanding what policy is. I have to be good at understanding the legislative process. I have to be good at understanding the news media, and I have to at least have an appreciation for, if not be a practitioner of, community organizing and coalition building. Because on the public health side, we rarely have money to win our debates. We do have information. Information alone is seldom sufficient. If you don't have money in a democratic political process, numbers are critical. And that partnership with organizing, with people who can bring numbers and faces and personal stories to the table, is so critical to what we do.
Well, that's amazing, David. And your website, the center, has all kinds of good examples, and you've developed tools and been involved in other issues.
From twisting of the science to big corporations to stakeholder battles,
We can all learn from you. Can you tell us a little bit about your other work in advocacy and its importance to our broader field?
Sure. Some of what we're doing is we're doing cross-issue and cross-industry work, looking at the playbooks that various industries will use to counter public health goals, whether that be the food industry on obesity and nutrition, whether it be the tobacco or the alcohol industries, the chemical industry on environmental health and pollution, the auto industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and so on. And when we talk across industry, it's very clear that there is a very similar playbook being used, and we can get out in front of that playbook if we understand what it is. If we understand how the science is likely to be twisted, we can get out in front in exposing the twisting of the science. We can get out in front in joining across public health to have higher standards around conflict of interest and disclosure, which is absolutely critical in scientific debates. Now, a lot of what I teach here at the school as well is just very general advocacy tools around what do you do in an interview? How do you maintain control of an interview? How do you frame your issue in the first place? Most of us in public health, we start with a problem. And newspaper stories are seldom written about problems. They're written about issues. So how do you take your problem and turn it into an issue? How do you take your issue and then analyze from a range of possible solutions what's winnable, what's worthwhile, what is immediate enough to your target audience that it touches them and can mobilize them, what's specific enough that people can understand it quickly. These sort of basic principles of picking solutions to an issue. And then moving from there, how do you frame that issue? How do you seize the major symbols of our day? So much of our political discourse in this country is not about the facts and figures of public health. It's about values. And if we can't speak the values language and win the values debate, we lose.
Well, David, you're a great example of the application of the social sciences to public health issues and so complementary to our work here in surveillance and epidemiology. It seems like advocacy and understanding the process is really an essential part of the toolbox of people who are developing their expertise in public health. So I'd like to close with a question to get your advice for students who would like to be able to work at that interface of science and policy the way you have.
There are lots of things I could talk about. Certainly one thing is train yourself as best you can in science. Get those science tools down because therein lies our credibility. But the second thing is many of us are passionate about these issues, and that's great, but we can never let our passion endanger our credibility. Never overstate the case. And the last one I want to stress is, and it may come as a surprise, but to my mind, there are lots of ingredients that you need for change. Certainly you need excellent science and information. You need to know the policy process. You need to know all the hows. But in my experience and in my career, change happens through relationships. And what I tell students, what I'd like to tell students is value your relationships. Take your relationships seriously. have lots of relationships. Have relationships with journalists. Have relationships with policymakers. Treat all of them with integrity. One of the important currencies of political power is your word. If you make a promise, keep it. Don't lie. Don't cover up a lie if one slipped out of your mouth accidentally. Your integrity is so important. It's the train tracks along which your relationships will run. And the best people that I've seen as advocates are people who are really good at making lots and maintaining lots of relationships.
David Jernigan, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for the work you do for the school and for the people of Maryland and really throughout the world through your center. It's a privilege to work with you. And thank you all for listening. It's great to have you here on Public Health on the Inside. I'll see you again soon.